Okay, we're back with more Wizard Kid, starring Prisoner of Azkaban. Once again, it's been another year. This is probably going to continue to hold. Let's just get into it, though.
And let me just say,
So,
wow.
yeah, okay.
No,
so,
I'm
we
good.
quick sort of clerical note here. We've kind of decided to sort of drop a lot of the counters. A lot of them were
Most,
kind of superfluous and didn't have
yeah.
any
So here's the
examples.
thing: is this was originally going to happen for just irritation reasons. I don't know what else you'd call it because it would always take me forever to fill these things out. And what's actually happening is we're removing the ones that took no effort and are keeping all the ones that were a bit more in depth and are in fact possibly adding more. So nothing has actually been done to make it easier.
Nobody ever really expressed any like passion for the counters, but we may
Yeah.
still round up some of the more notable examples of that kind of stuff near the end of each book.
Yeah,
We'll see
I
what
think what we
works.
should probably just do is point them out as they happen, but don't like make a whole segment dedicated to them, and then we can just count them up
Right.
at the end of the book.
Yeah, seems fine to me. So, yeah, you have your first note here for the first chapter.
Okay. I wasn't sure if we had any overall like starting thoughts on this one. I don't know if I
Uh,
particularly do.
hmm. I like this one. Um, it's not my favorite. I've already mentioned my favorite was Chamber of Secrets. I still like this
Oh
one a lot
shit! The
though.
rest of the series is gonna be bad then.
Um, Nah, I mean, it's weird. People like some people say that the series turns dark in Goblet of Fire or at the end of Goblet of Fire. Some people say it starts kind of here, and to an
Yeah.
extent, that's true. It's not really a hard point, but yeah. Especially the movie has like a really big tone shift because there's like a new director and everything.
Yeah, the movie's
Um,
weird. I didn't really read any of the books until the first four were all out anyway, so for me, there's nothing that special about this one other than the fact that there were a lot of parts that like spooked me, but we'll get to those when they come up.
yes,
So,
yeah,
but yeah, we start off with a dedication. It says to
as
Jill
usual.
Pruitt and I guess it's
Ian
Ain.
Keeley,
Yeah, Ain Keeley,
that's
the
it.
godmothers of Swing. And so I had to look that one up. Apparently, they were J.K. Rowling's flatmates when she lived in Portugal. I didn't realize that she ever did.
Me neither.
They used to go to a club called Swing regularly, and because they were there a lot of the time, they called themselves godmothers. I don't understand this, but that's what it is. So I guess it's just they were old friends of hers.
Yeah. Um, so at the beginning, the book has this like weird coy tone at the beginning where it's like, well, Harry actually likes doing his school homework, and actually his guardians don't want him to do it, so he's having to like do it, at night sneakily. What's up with that? And he hates the summer holidays. And it's like, what the hell
Yeah.
is this? It's just being
Well, it's
really
just
coy.
like, you might think that this is just your average everyday kid, but actually, he's kind of weird. Like
Yeah.
the first couple chapters of every Harry Potter book are a little weird because they have to account for
Mm,
people who are just randomly picking up without reading the previous ones, and
yeah.
they're still not going to understand a lot of the shit that's going on. But you gotta
Right.
at least try, I guess.
Yeah. Then you have a note here.
Yeah. So, I only just learned this one like 20 minutes ago, but apparently in the very first British releases of the book, when it's talking about Harry like working on his summer homework,
Homework.
it mentions a history of magic by Adalbert Waffling, which is not the correct author because it's supposed to be Matilda Bagshot.
Yeah. And this was like the website we found said this was a difference between the UK and US versions. My copy is definitely from pretty close to release because in the like opening pages it says it lists the titles in the series and it only has the first three. And I
Yeah,
looked it up and Goblet of Fire came out exactly 1 year after Prisoner of Azkaban, which means that my copy is from within that first year, but it's still post
yeah.
revision. So
But so yeah, they fixed that, and then I had to check because if we're not counting this one as like a canon mention, I looked the name up, and he was listed as an author of one of the other books in the first in like Sorcerer's Stone. It was Magical Theory, apparently.
I see.
And so I'm like, oh shit, does that actually make him a one off now if we're not counting this? But no, because he is also mentioned in Deathly Hallows.
Okay. So yeah, so he's doing his homework, and specifically, he's supposed to write an essay, and the essay prompt seems to be said to be, "Witch burning in the 14th century was completely pointless. Discuss." Now, I don't know how essays work over there, but it sounds like, obviously this is a history sort of assessment. I seem to recall that when I was in history class, the way they wanted us to write our like essays or mini essays was whenever they would have this kind of point, this idea or an opinion, and they wanted us to discuss it, they wanted us to look at both sides of it, give arguments for both, and then kind of conclude and be like, overall, I think I agree with this side or with this side. Um, so I like the idea, if that is indeed the case here, that he's actually having to give the opposite argument as well for, no, it was totally legit for them to try to, burn our kind at the stake. Now, granted, it goes on to establish that, like, oh, this didn't work because, Muggles couldn't really hurt us. Like,
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think the argument here is were they justified in doing it. It was just
no, I know.
like, was it pointless? And the answer is yes, because
I feel like that's inarguable if it didn't do anything.
yeah, it's weird because it's Harry is having to read this by flashlight, like hiding from the Dursleys, and it's he's like looking through the book trying to find something to write about, and he just finds this one passage that's like, yes, many witches were captured, but they would freeze the flames, which I have to question. I assume this is wandless magic, but I don't know.
Right,
so it's like, they would freeze the flames and be like, oh no, my god, I'm burning, and then it's like, okay, sure. But yeah, it's like this one paragraph, he's like, oh yes, and then he goes to write stuff. It's like, what the fuck is he writing? Just rewording this one paragraph? You can't make an essay out of that. But we will also mention that Wendelin the Weird was caught like 19 times because
actually.
Apparently it was toned down in some other version of the story.
Oh, okay. In mine it says 47. Yeah.
Yeah, so like they were caught all these times, and because they liked the feeling of the frozen flames or some shit. I don't know. It was stupid.
In mine it says. Yeah, the witches and wizards would use a flame freezing charm, and instead of pain, it would be a gentle tickling sensation. And Wendelin liked it so much that she did it 47 times in various disguises.
Yeah, it says 47 in mine too. I swear the wiki said something else. But anyway, this is a one-off named character, so sound the alarm.
Mm-hmm. There's also another oddity in this paragraph, as you pointed out.
Is there?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, here we go. So, yeah, the book here, it says, non-magic people, more commonly known as muggles, and, continues onward. And so I'm just like, I have to imagine this paragraph in the middle of this book is just be like, by the way, in case you don't know what muggles are. And so it's like, obviously it's for the benefit of the person reading the Harry Potter book, but it's a little ham-fisted.
Yeah. God. So
I'm looking up
sneakily do this.
I'm trying to look up the. Where's? Okay, what the hell? Here we go. The card in the chocolate card in the video game states that she was only burned 14 times, not 47.
Oh,
that's what I was thinking of.
Gotcha.
But very important. But
yeah,
so just a couple things going on while Harry's trying to write his essay. He's like being very sneaky about it because the Dursleys threw all of his shit into the cupboard and he had to sneak some of it out at one point. And so he's like paranoid that the scratching of his quill is gonna wake up the Dursleys. And I'm just like, good fucking god. Like,
yeah.
Like, what do you even say to that?
I don't know. And speaking of him sneaking his stuff out, this is kind of ahead, but I feel like it fits better here. Since, yeah, he like they locked it in the cupboard, and it's mentioned that he actually went down and like picked the lock to get it out. And I'm like, that's interesting. I wonder where he learned how to do it.
Probably Fred and George.
Probably, but it's never mentioned, so
yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, they didn't want to focus on that. He just did it somehow.
So all this paranoia is, because the Dursleys are terrified.
Yeah, it said something about like I hate not having the actual passage here because my notes aren't specific, but basically it's just something about like the Dursleys are having to live in terror that one day their neighbors are going to find out about Harry's abnormalities because they want to appear normal and he's the only weird one or whatever. But, like, in actuality, you know, they're supposed to be keeping him being a wizard secret anyway because that's wizarding law. So it's, like, you know, obviously they're doing it in an incredibly shitty way, but I feel like they do in some way, like, you know, they're justified in worrying about people finding out. There's, again, super minor stuff, but there's also some mention of you know, Harry has, he has to get all this stuff done over the summer, and it's hard because they locked his stuff away. It mentioned, like, he had a particularly nasty essay that he had to write about shrinking potions for Snape, and I'm trying to think, like, why would you write an essay for potions? Because this is, like, you know, in the later year classes where you're learning the actual theory behind it, I guess that makes sense. But I think at this point they're still basically just following a recipe.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Like, in science, I think I remember maybe a couple times that we wrote essays. It was in sort of the higher years, and we had, like I did one about, like, we had to assess, like, you know, are electric cars, like, good, you know, better than gas-powered cars, right? We had to, like, write an essay about that in science based on the scientific
it's like, you know, obviously scientific subjects can lend themselves to that. I feel like potions doesn't really, like, what would you write about the shrinking potion other than, I guess, like, just what to, like,
its uses,
you know,
like maybe,
once you're done,
maybe there's subtleties in the different ways you can produce it or something. Like, maybe it can work slightly differently depending on how you do it. Maybe there's multiple different types of shrinking potions.
Maybe. I guess there's room for something there.
Yeah,
it just kind of stood out as weird to me.
So you know, he's kind of reminiscing in his room late at night, and he's thinking back to how, you know, at the end of the previous book, it's mentioned that he gives Ron and Hermione his phone number, or rather, the Dursleys' home phone number. And so here we get a follow-up on that, where it turns out that Ron did in fact call the house, and not knowing how phones work, believed he had to yell into it, presumably because he's far away. But
yeah, just screaming each word very clearly into the phone, and, like, you know, Vernon picks the phone up and hears this and, like, immediately, like, points a gun at the phone. Like,
yeah, basically. Like, don't ever call my family again. Like,
yeah, I love the bit of them just screaming at each other. It's just nothing but all caps for a couple paragraphs.
Yep. I have to question though. How is Ron calling him? Because does Ron have a phone at home now? Because wizards obviously don't have phones. It's established right here that, you know, if you weren't sure otherwise, he doesn't know how to use a phone, so they probably don't have one unless they just got it for this. Or he's. I think it was
was it mentioned that Arthur got one somehow? Like,
I mean, that would make sense,
but
you still have to get broadband. You can't just get a phone and then, you know, there you go. It's not like a car. You need to have infrastructure for this kind of thing.
I'm going to claim that Rowling did not think of this and just assumes that they got a phone and then Arthur, you know, used a spell on it, and now it is connected to just the rest of the telephone network somehow.
See, I like the idea that they called someone from BT to come set up their hub, and they had to, like, hide all their shit and pretend they were muggles. God. And there was, like, you know, wacky hijinks that ensued.
Yeah, like, you know, at one point like the ghoul comes down the stairs and somebody has to, like, stand in front of it to hide it, and there's just, like, random hijinks. Here's me bitching about grammar. Let's see. Here we go. So Harry suspected that Ron had warned Hermione not to call, which was a pity because Hermione, the cleverest witch in Harry's year, had Muggle parents, knew perfectly well how to use a telephone, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what the hell is this had Muggle parents separated by commas?
Yeah,
like,
that confused me at first too, the first reading, when you posted it. I didn't notice it when I read the book. When you pointed it out, I'm like, oh yeah, shouldn't it be because Hermione, the cleverest witch in Harry's year, who had Muggle parents? There should be a who in there. But actually, no, it does work. It's just a really long run-on sentence, okay? It goes like this. Because Hermione, the cleverest witch in Harry's year, had Muggle parents, knew perfectly well how to use a telephone, and would probably have had enough sense to not say that she went to Hogwarts.
Okay, I get it. Yeah, I just read that. I'm like, is there just a missing word here? Like, what the hell?
Hermione is this, and this is what it's trying to say.
I say.
It's just kind of awkward to read.
So, I think we have a bit of a jump here. This is all just Harry reminiscing on stuff, and then he like is about to go to bed. Notices that it's 1 a.m. and he's like, oh shit, I've been 13 for a whole hour and didn't realize it.
Yes,
and then he's like, gee, I wish I sure enjoyed my birthday like other children. And then immediately some ill-defined mass approaches the window and realizes that it's 2 owls carrying another one. So they fly in, a ruckus occurs, and this doesn't wake up the Dursleys, but the scratching of the quill theoretically could have. But
also Hedwig screeching against the cage did. Oh no, actually, I guess it was the bars being pulled away from the window in the last one. Not so much Hedwig.
Yeah. Oh, well. But anyway, so yeah, there's 3 owls. He gets stuff from Ron and Hermione, and also just like the school in general, and from Hagrid. So he opens up Ron's thing, and there's the newspaper clipping, basically saying that. The
author won like a prize.
Yeah, it was like a ministry like lottery thing. They won a bunch of money and they took the trip to Egypt, which turns out to be a pretty big plot point later on. But for right now, it's just like, oh look, they won some money and they're really nice poor people. They deserved it. And here's a picture of them just hanging out in front of a pyramid. I want to point out here basically just I've seen a lot of people get like really smug over the fact, like, oh, the Weasleys are so poor, and here they are winning money, and they blow it all on a vacation instead of saving it like responsible
people. Aren't allowed to enjoy themselves when they get the windfalls, like
they could have used that money to buy better things for the children. It's like, fuck off.
These are the same people who will be like, these so-called refugees have smartphones.
Yeah,
should they be getting food? It's like
the point is there is a bit of validity to that. When it comes to stuff that they're having to constantly do without these important things because they don't have the money for it. But they saved at least enough money to get Ron a wand, which is important.
Being poor is a consistent condition. You can't just get out of it by just getting one set of money. It's a class thing.
Yeah,
it's gonna continue to be an issue for them. Like. Yes, they could either it's basically people are presenting a false dichotomy here. They're saying, oh, they could have stopped being poor, or at least become much less poor. But it's not like a stat that you just increase. It's just it would keep them a bit more comfortable for a while, but they'd get back to their normal situation unless something more major changed in their life.
Also, I think most of them are still pretty, okay with their situation. Like, there have been times where Ron complains, I hate being poor. It's usually just because he feels embarrassed that his stuff isn't as good as his friends. But, they're getting by. If their financial issues were that much of a problem, Molly could get a job.
Yeah.
And she doesn't, and they still are fine. So, yeah, it's just, they happen to win this money, and they're like, let's just do something fun for once.
Plus, they were going to go visit Bill, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, so we have a nice bit of foreshadowing here because, Ron and Hermione get them gifts, and Ron's like, I got this pocket sneaker scope from a vendor here, and supposedly it's supposed to light up if there's somebody untrustworthy nearby, and it kept lighting up at dinner last night. So Percy said that it was a load of junk and it was unreliable. But little did he know that Fred and George had put beetles in his soup.
I like them just sneaking beetles into his soup first.
Yeah, I like how Ron knew this and he's just like, yeah, that's fine. but also it's good foreshadowing because and by the way, if you're new to this, we talk about spoilers ahead of time when we talk about foreshadowing. So spoiler warning, I guess. It's not going off because Fred and George put beetles in Percy's soup. It's going off because there is a whole ass man in the form of a rat sneaking around. Ron's pet rat, Scabbers, is actually Peter Pettigrew, who's a character we'll meet later, and that's almost certainly what it was actually going off for.
Yeah. It's kind of impressive how much I managed to miss that in my first. I don't even think it was just my first read, my first few reads of this series, because. They mentioned this thing just being unreliable and constantly going off, and I just kind of took that at face value, and I'm like, yeah, this thing sucks ass. But then in Goblet of Fire, we have Moody, or should I say fake Moody, as the defense teacher, and he's got all of these devices. He has like the faux glass, and he has a bunch of sneakoscopes. And I'm like, why does he have these if these things suck? Like, they don't work. Doesn't he know that? And it just never occurred to me, like, oh no, they actually do work. I just wasn't getting the point.
Yeah, that's fun. And I don't think Harry ever notices, right? Like, he's never like, oh shit, like, this is just something you're supposed to pick up yourself.
Yeah, I think so.
So, yeah.
So, I don't know if there's much else to say about Ron's vacation. Like, they mentioned that they're like checking the tombs and stuff, and there's like, ancient Egyptian wizards had put curses, and there's like skeletons with multiple heads and stuff, and it's an interesting bit of flavor. You don't really get to see much though.
Yeah.
So that's Ron's letter. Hermione's letter is of course a lot more verbose, and just like, oh, I'm having so much fun in France, and I learned all this interesting stuff about witch burning, so I rewrote my entire essay. I sure hope it isn't too long. And then she, apparently Hedwig shows up for no reason in France, and Hermione's just like, oh, I can use you to send Harry a present. I wasn't sure how I was going to get it through customs. It's like, what the hell happened there? Okay. But, so she sends him a gift, which, Harry is like, he's happy, first of all, just to receive a gift, because he almost never does. But he seems like genuinely like, oh man, this thing's great. And the thing he gets is a broomstick service kit, which has a bottle of polish, a pair of scissors, a compass, and just a manual that tells you how to care for the broomstick. And I'm trying to think, like...
It's like he could already get the scissors probably anyway, no?
I mean, I assume so, but like, I'm trying to think of a comparison here. It's like, if you really like your bike or your skateboard or something, and like that's a core part of your personality, and someone's like, here, I bought you this bike polish. It's like, oh, wow! Like, would anybody like really care that much? Like,
yeah, I don't know. I feel like you'd appreciate it. You'd be like, this is a nice gift, and it's a good gift. But it's not the kind of thing that would be like, oh shit, like it wouldn't change your fucking day, you'll change your life. Or, like, make your day.
I'm gonna take this as just if more than anything, it's showing just how little Harry ever receives anything. Like, and so, but
yeah. He actually gets another gift, sort of. It's something that was required for school anyway, but Hagrid gets it for him as a gift. It is required for him for the classes.
Yeah. He gets a package from Hagrid, and it's just like, I got you this. I thought it would be useful. You'll figure out why. Not saying anything else. Wink, wink. And you want to talk about it?
So he gets this thing called the Monster Book of Monsters, which is a book about monsters that is a monster.
It's so stupid.
It has eyes, and it has teeth. Like, that when the book opens and closes, it has it has jaws there.
It was described as like scuttling like a crab.
Yeah, it has tiny little legs. It can move around, it can fuck shit up, and it can hurt you. Why?
Actually, I think this might count as whimsy.
It definitely does.
I'm adding it to the list right now.
So, yeah, it's incredibly stupid, but I kind of love it. So Harry opens this package, and it's suddenly just like, and just starts like running around his room. He's like, oh fuck. And he manages to somehow subdue it by getting one of his old belts and just clamping it shut and tightening the belt. And this works apparently. So yeah, I have nothing else to say. Incredibly stupid thing that is also hilarious.
Attention to detail that he would have belts because he's wearing Dudley's hand-me-downs and Dudley is fat.
That's true. That makes sense.
Anyway,
also in the movie,
the book is so stupid.
I seem to remember this. It seems to remember in the movie it makes a little more sense because it comes with a clasp. He doesn't use a belt. He uses something that's kind of built into the book, I think, to seal it. And also this scene doesn't even happen here. This scene doesn't even happen at all in the movie. Like, him doing his essay does, but then there's no part where he receives the mail.
From what I remember, the opening scene The opening
few
scene
chapters.
is he's using Lumos, which he shouldn't
That's right.
be because it's underage
Yeah.
magic. And then it's like Vernon opens the door and Harry's like hiding under the blanket. He's like,
I'm not
I'm
doing
not gonna
anything."
get caught. And then it like
Oh.
and then it like fades out awkwardly. Awkwardly, it's like, oh shit, movie's over. It's like
But yeah, so yeah, they moved this scene to later on. He's like at an inn basically when this happens, but we'll get to that when we get to that.
yeah.
And
So
then finally,
yeah, so the last thing in this chapter is he's looking at the letter from Hogwarts, and it's this thing you'd usually expect. It's just, magically every year we go there on September 1st, which is always a Monday somehow, or a Sunday, I forget which, and blah blah blah. Here's the time you have to be there, and then it's like also third years can visit Hogsmeade, but only if you have your parents sign this permission slip. And I need to just address this thing now because everybody has pointed this out before, but this permission slip is so worthless. Like, this school has a reputation of constantly being under attack and having, like, terrible things happening to it. It's allegedly very safe, and to be fair, it's rare for students to die, but, I mean, yeah. But yeah, it I'm trying to think here. The reason you'd have a permission slip for like a school field trip is usually because
I always assumed it was because this village is not technically part of Hogwarts, and
yes, but this is the thing though. Is I'm trying to. Maybe I'm just completely missing the point here, but if you have a field trip where it's like, we're going to be going to the museum, and, we're taking all the students, it's going to be like, a bus drive into the city, we're going to spend the day there, blah, blah, blah. The permission slip is saying, like, yes, we are giving you permission to take our child outside of the school to this other location. We are aware that they will be there.
yeah.
And
I feel like it's the same thing here.
The problem is this is for it's a boarding school. They're already miles and miles away from home. And like, does it really make that much difference if they're in a quaint little town near the school compared to
I feel like it does because
school?
that's not under the jurisdiction of the school. Like, it's not, the staff aren't governing, or no, not governing, but you know what I mean. They're not looking after that place. This is a place with strangers, people who don't work for the school, who can't be, random people at the Three Broomsticks and the candy shop can't be held accountable for anything to do with the school. They don't work for them. They're just a village nearby.
Yeah,
So,
I guess. It's one of those things that breaks down as soon as you look at it any further, because it's like, are the parents aware of the Dementors guarding the school? Are they aware of the giant three-headed dog that they're stashing in some room that is barely locked? Like, it's just...
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. It makes enough sense to me if you don't consider the other stuff, but it is definitely here for plot contrivance.
Yeah, it's basically just there to create a conflict because, oh no, Harry wants to get this thing signed, but his guardians are assholes, and then he doesn't get it signed, and oh no, he wants to be with his friends. What do we do? And so,
Yeah.
antics ensue.
So that's the first chapter. Not much really happens, but basically just serves as a recap again, like usual. I say like usual, like last time.
Now, the first book, I'll recap to the seventh. It's just a cycle. So, chapter 2 begins with, it mentions that Dudley was whining that the walk between the kitchen and the living room was too great, and he needed a second TV in the kitchen. So he has been spending the entire summer just continuously eating in front of this TV, which I think is just a brand new level of comic absurdity. But as soon as I thought about it, I'm like, oh shit, this reminds me of that one summer where I just basically spent almost every day watching Nicktoons reruns. Just on the TV in like the room attached to our kitchen, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm Dudley. But yeah, I don't know. So it's it's just a way to point out, hey, Dudley is fat and you should hate him.
Yeah, basically. So yeah, we get reintroduced to Dudley, Vernon, and Petunia in person here. they're being shitty as usual. Vernon continues to not have a neck.
Petunia continues to be horse-faced.
Yeah. And so they're watching TV, and the news comes on. And they're basically talking about how, like, there's this escaped convict called something Black, and, you should be aware because he's
armed and dangerous.
Yeah. So watch
and Vernon is just like, well, look at that hair. Of course he's terrible.
And then they're like, oh, but they didn't say where he escaped from. It's like, I assume this is the local news. So
I am also wondering if Dudley is watching the news because he's just entertained by any form of television, or if it is like, he's
there's moving pictures on the screen.
He's, watching cartoons, and it's just like, this just in, there's a convict on the loose. But,
yeah.
But then the thing is, after that, they're just like, meanwhile, at the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, and I'm like, what the fuck is a fishery? I had to look that one up. It's not interesting, though.
Right. So, yeah, I looked up to make sure, like, is this ministry real? It is, yeah. It got renamed. Funnily enough, this was a very outdated name for it at the time that the book was written. Like, so I don't know why Rowling remembered this name for it, but yeah, they got changed to, like, the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, and Food. And then it just got merged into some other, like, department in, like, 2002 or something. So
didn't you also mention that, like, Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries and Food is just abbreviated as MAF?
Yeah.
Or something, but yeah. You'd think that food would include agriculture and fish, but I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
The only reason I pointed it out is because it was just a stupid sounding name.
Well, I guess it would include stuff that's, like, processed, like, I don't know, candy or Anyway, so they're continuing to talk about this escaped convict, and Vernon and Petunia are just like, well, mostly Vernon is like, when will they learn they need to just hang these people? They're fucking, scum of the earth. They're, blight on our society.
Upon this earth.
Yeah. So, he's basically like, really viciously like, just fucking kill them. Just, death penalty to them all. And to kind of put this into perspective, because, in some places, including many states of the U.S., there's still the death penalty. That's not the case here, and it hasn't been for a pretty long time. He's saying this in 1993. And the last time anybody was executed in the UK was 1964, and it was completely abolished in 69. Technically, it could be used in wartime, but they hadn't used that for even longer, so whatever. And they can't do it at all now. But anyway, so for a very long time, no executions. And so, unlike in places where it's more kind of normalized and it's in use, like, to me, this comes across as, like, really barbaric. This is, like, a disgusting thing for a person to say. And so... yeah, especially for his place in time, like it's not. I would not assume it's the default opinion at all. There might, I'm sure there's a contingent of people that are like, bring it back, but I think most people are like, yeah, that's pretty barbaric. So
yeah. Comment whether or not you agree with the death penalty.
God. Anyway, meanwhile, Petunia's just like, yeah, I agree, and she's like spying on the neighbors.
Yeah, it mentions that like. It plays out like a fucking cartoon here, because they're watching the news. They mention the convict then like escaping. Vernon's like, you haven't said where he's escaped from. He could be coming up the street right now. And then like on cue, Petunia's like, oh, and like tries to see it, like, oh shit, is he coming? And but then then they have this whole discussion about the death penalty or whatever, and then it just says that she goes back to looking through the neighbor's runner beans, and I'm like, what the fuck is a runner bean? So I had to look this one up, and here's the stupid thing is, when I searched for it, the like Google suggestion thing that's like people also asked, the result in that said it is the UK term for what the US calls pole beans, and I'm like, okay, well, I haven't heard of those either, and it's just like, okay, these are basically just green beans, and so I was going to put this as an unlocalized Britishism, but then I found out that was wrong, and that green beans, runner beans, and pole beans are all actually totally different things, and there's nothing...
They just have a similar culinary use, like people will use them in similar situations in different places, depending on what they can get, but they are different plants.
So very, as always, we focus on the unimportant things here. This is
Yes.
what we do. Because
Run,
what I enjoy doing is not just looking at the plot and the characters, but really fucking minor sentences you would read, not remember at all, and move on. And I'm going to be like, no, hold on, what was that? Like, that's my job.
yeah. So running beans though just remind me of this is a stupid, pointless anecdote, but in primary school, I'm not sure if this is the case in every primary school in the UK, or if this is a time-based thing, or if it was because maybe it was like a Christian thing. It wasn't like a super Christian school. We did kind of like sometimes do hymns and stuff like that, and just generally sing stuff. We sometimes we would just have gay little songs about nature and about being happy and shit like that. And so I remember there was this one that we would do. It was often around like September, so it was like the harvest sort of time, September, October. We had a bunch of these different harvest-related songs, and one of them was basically just listing different fruits and vegetables. And so it was like, cauliflower's fluffy, cabbage is green, strawberry sweeter than any I've seen, etc. There's a part in that that's like, gooseberries hairy and lettuce is fat, radishes round and runner beans flat. So,
all right then.
I heard of them from that probably originally.
Good.
Anyway, following that,
Yeah.
I have to check the context of this because
I've got it here. It's
is it
so it's talking. So what happens is after the whole news broadcast and everything, Vernon's like, "Well, I'm off to go pick up like Marge," and Harry's like, "The fuck? What do you mean Marge is coming here?" Apparently he hasn't been told this. And so it mentions, like, Harry hates his Aunt Marge, and we'll get into the whole, like, the familial bit in a second here. But, it's just like, here's some highlights of their last interactions. There's the one where he got chased up a tree and stuck up there until midnight because she wouldn't call the dog off. And then there's one, it says that she turned up at Christmas with a computerized robot for Dudley and a box of dog biscuits for Harry.
Yeah, so my note here is just in quotes, computerized robot, because I want to know what the hell that means.
My guess is it's just Cartman in the Awesemo costume.
I'm guessing what they mean is like a robot toy doesn't necessarily have any programming in it, and so this is specifying that it's like a Robo-Sapien type thing where it actually does have like mechanical parts and it's electronically powered and moves around and
it has lasers
stuff. Yeah, lasers and X-ray vision and
yeah, you can see through wood.
Boots. Yeah, but yeah, so
was not designed for that function.
"Quote unquote" Aunt Marge. This is an interesting thing because we kind of had the same situation here where our initial. So the book says like, oh, Harry had always been forced to call her Aunt Marge, even though she's Vernon's sister, so she's not related to him. And both of us had the same initial reaction of like, well, it still counts. And then we thought about it more, and we're like, no, it doesn't. Like,
yeah, because my thought was like, it's, I'm just basically thinking like, your parents' brothers or sisters are your aunts and uncles, and I'm just like, okay, well, this is his parents' sister, so, like, what's the problem there? And I'm like, oh, right, Vernon isn't his parent. So yeah, it's his mom's sister's husband's sister. Right. So she is pretty far removed.
Yeah.
Like,
so yeah, and Aunt Marge is gonna show up. We'll have more to say about her.
Yeah, but, she's pretty fucking bad.
So Harry is he's like, this sucks. I hate this. And then he's like, wait a minute, maybe I can actually make this into my benefit.
Well, we skipped a bit here because there's actually a couple instances of Sassy Harry, which I'm just going to count as one instance. Sure, but as you wrote here, it's like basically Harry becoming bolder. But there's this whole bit where Vernon's like, you're going to keep a civil tongue when you're talking to Marge. And he goes, all right, if she does when she's talking to me. And then he kind of ignores this and is like, she doesn't know anything about your abnormality. I don't want any funny stuff. You'll behave yourself. And he's like, I will if she does. I kind of like that.
Yeah, so he's we have a nice progression. In the first book, he was completely terrified of them. In the second one, he kind of stands up to them a little bit, but is still basically, you know.
Yeah, and this one, he's mostly just kind of sick of their shit and has to
Yeah.
put up with it and sneak around it, but doesn't, like, he doesn't necessarily feel as miserable. It's just, you know, I'll grit my teeth through this and be out of it.
Yeah. So, you know, so Harry's like, he's thinking, how can I give this into my benefit? And he's like, so, well, Vernon, what if I forget? You know, what if I mess up? And I
Well, yeah, because he has to claim that he goes to St. Brutus's secure center for incurably criminal boys, which I have to question if this is even a real place.
No, it's not. There's no St. Brutus either.
Well, I mean, like, within the context of the story, anyway.
Oh,
like,
I see. Okay.
Did Vernon just make up a school? And he's like, yeah, we'll tell everybody that he went there, and they won't bother to check if it's real.
I don't think Vernon would do that. I think he would know about a real place. He was probably considering sending him there anyway. Just, you know, being an ass about it. But anyway, so Harry's like, what if I forget? And Vernon's like, I'll beat the stuffing out of you if you do. So I think this is the first time that Vernon's given like an explicit threat of violence to Harry, to my memory. Like, usually he'll just be like, they'll be, you know, I'll be so cross and they'll be, you'll regret it. But now explicitly, he's like, I will fucking beat you.
Yeah, this isn't Vernon, but there was the instance in the last book where Petunia, like, tried to hit him with a frying pan.
That's true. That came across more as, like, slapstick, though. It was like, yeah, it was just offhandedly mentioned as, like, oh, you know, he was avoiding Petunia's frying pan throughout the summer. It's like, what do you mean? Anyway.
So, yeah, he basically is just like, you know, if you agree to sign my form at the end of the week, then I'll be good, and, you know, you won't have any issues from me. And Vernon, like, very hesitantly agrees to this. And I love this. I wrote that this is, like, such a minor, stupid thing, but Vernon slams the door and, like, a pane of glass falls out of it. And so I'm just thinking, like, you know, because this is a book and there's more important things going on, we have no reason to focus on this any further, so they mention it and that's it. But if this was a real thing, it's like, you know, he breaks this window and it's like, oh shit, now we gotta replace this. You know, Marge is gonna be here in like half an hour. So we're gonna have to, like, figure something out, like tape up the hole. Like, what are the neighbors gonna think? Because Petunia is, like, super vain. And it's like...
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't know.
Eh. Nah,
again, no reason for the book to focus on it. I understand why they didn't, but I hear this happening. I'm like, you know, him just breaking that window isn't really that minor of a thing to gloss over. This would kind of be a bigger deal, but
yeah. So then we get Marge showing up, and she's, you know, fucking smothering Dudley with affection, and
yeah, and I'll go ahead and mention here, you know, as always, we're not here to get overly political and shit on Rowling for her various viewpoints and stuff, but I know that there's probably some people who take issue with Marge having a mustache and being really, like, ugly and beefy and manly and stuff, and, you know, it's one of those things where, like, this character is supposed to be hateable. It's very easy to just make, you know, the big ugly fat lady be the bad guy, and, like, I really doubt anything worse was meant from that, but read into it how you wish. I'm not here to...
It might be. I don't know. I feel like there's not much else to say about it anyway, even if it was. It's, you know, you know, at the very least, it's kind of a just lazy, tropey character. But I mean, the Dursleys are already pretty fucking cartoonishly evil anyway, and
right,
you know, play into those stereotypes. So anyway, I assume also when they say that Marge has a mustache, I don't think they mean a full...
Well, no, it's just that, you know,
she's got some fuzz there, which, you know, cis women always have anyway. Like, they always have at least a little bit, unless they specifically get rid of it. It's just that she specifically doesn't. So
right.
Anyway, right. So yeah. So she calls Dudley her nephew poo, and I don't think that anyone anywhere has ever called their nephew their nephy, let alone nephew poo. And it pained me to read this.
It's pretty bad.
It's really bad. And so she goes up and gives him this giant fucking hug, and you liked this part.
Yeah, it's great because, like, yeah, she goes and grabs Dudley. She's holding Ripper the bulldog, like, under one arm, and then gives, like, this tight, bone-crunching hug to Dudley with her other arm. And then Harry slash the narrator comments on the fact, like, the only reason that Dudley puts up with this is because he's paid well for it. And sure enough, as soon as she let go, Harry could see a crisp 20-pound note in his fist. And I'm just like, it's so fucking perfect. It's like, I'm trying to think here, like, which is funnier? Is it Petunia, like, giving him the money beforehand, like, okay, Marge is going to give you a hug, you're just going to have to deal with it, here, have 20 pounds.
I assume Marge slipped it into
I think it's even funnier that, he's getting hugged, and then he, like, snaps his fingers, and then she just goes over and slips him the 20. Like,
yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah. So Vernon's like, you have a bunch of dogs, right? Well, who's looking after your other dog? Because she's brought one with her, but she has, she apparently breeds dogs and has a bunch of...
And drowns them.
Oh, yeah, we'll get to that. And she's like, I had Colonel Fubster look after them. And this is a named one-off character. He's mentioned a few times in this one chapter and then never again. Colonel Fubster is an incredibly stupid name.
I love it.
But this is apparently just a neighbor of hers, who she actually...
Yeah, that's the thing. I had to look this guy up because there was a tiny part of me that wondered if there was something more going on with this guy, because, to skip ahead a little bit, there's the part where she like breaks her wine glass, and it's implied that Harry like made it explode out of anger, and she says like the same thing happened at Colonel Fubster's the other day. And I'm just like, oh shit, is he a secret wizard too? So I looked him up. I'm like, is there any info on this guy? And there really isn't. But apparently, according to Pottermore, Marge like was in love with him but didn't want to admit it, and he like has absolutely no feelings for her because she's kind of repulsive. So that's basically it.
Yeah. So then we have another instance of a good phrase, which you pointed out.
Oh yeah, there was. Let me find the context. Give me a sec. There's the whole thing where, Harry's having to act like he's going to the stupid criminal school, and, she asks, do they use the cane there? And he says yes, and then, feeling he might as well do the thing properly, added all the time. And I saw that, and I'm like, hold on, I remember this, because back in book 1, you pointed out the phrase, when Dumbledore learns that Harry, like, learned who, Nicholas Flamel was, he goes like, you did do the thing properly after all.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's right.
And I'm just like, what the fuck is this phrase?
That was me that pointed that.
So,
it is kind of odd, I don't know.
It's the second time it's shown up, and I don't think it ever shows up again, but it's a bit of an odd one. Yeah.
I was gonna say, it could be a counter for that, but if there's only 2, then yeah. So they invite Marge in, they're in the kitchen, and they kind of continue the similar thread from earlier where they're talking about the death penalty, and they're basically just like,
this is also like, it's conversations happening over the course of the week.
That's true, yeah.
A lot of time, you're just seeing snippets of her being horrible and usually, randomly lashing out at Harry for no reason.
Yeah, she's lashing out at Harry, bullying him, and also just, talking to Vernon, and they're having these conversations where they're just talking about, greasy-ass, low-life scum that need to be fucking killed. And I know there's, this is fiction, and there's plenty of worse things that the villains do in these books, but for whatever reason, their extreme enthusiasm where they're just like, people like you, Harry, and your father who deserve that, you deserve...
It was specifically because, I think the conversation came up with the whole, if there's something wrong with the bitch, there's something wrong with the pup. It's nothing against your family, Petunia, but your sister was a bad egg, and, it's like, Harry gets it from her. I love how they just randomly fucking hate Harry for no reason. Petunia and Vernon, you can claim it's because he's magical and they don't like that, but Marge doesn't know that. Why does she hate him so much? What the fuck is her problem? But, there's this whole thing, it's like, so what does father do anyway? And,
Vernon was like, he was unemployed.
Yeah.
You know, he was,
And she's like, the layabout, like, he deserved what he had coming, like, staying on society's
staying on
ass.
society, leech on our fucking people. It just, again, I know there's worse shit in this book, but it really made my blood boil reading all that.
I mean, that's the thing is, it's easier to relate to just people being really shitty than it is, like a mass murderer.
Yeah, exactly.
It reminded me of, looking way further ahead into the series in
Umbridge.
Not even Umbridge, actually. In Deathly Hallows, there's the part when the Death Eaters are attacking the school, and Voldemort basically announces that it was after Harry turns himself in. He announces that, like, Harry tried to run away, and, we caught him and killed him. Like, this is your brave hero fleeing from the scene. And, it was pointed out in Mark Reed's Harry Potter, he's just like, holy shit, Voldemort is horrible. Like, yes, he's murdering people, and obviously this is worse, but he's also just completely lying and, making Harry look like this pathetic little coward when really he was doing something incredibly brave. Like, fuck this guy, seriously.
Yeah.
Like, it's the little things sometimes that really just push you. Like,
yeah. So they continue bitching about Harry and his family, and at one point they use the word wastrel, which I had never heard before. I had to look that up. It's kind of obscure. I'll have to remember it. I kind of like it. It's a fun little insult, despite what I was just saying about their sentiments. And at one point, also, Marge speaks in brackets. Let me find
it was. She
what
said
Americans will call parentheses.
Yeah, because she mentions, like, your parents went out and got themselves killed in a car crash, drunk, I expect.
Yeah, and that's in brackets or parentheses. And it's like, how did she do that? I mean, I know this is just a transcription of it, but I almost never see dialogue written with brackets in it. Like, that's really odd to me.
But yeah, so, throughout this whole week, it was actually, like, Harry mentioned at one point that he was longing for the days of just having to deal with the Dursleys, because that was almost tolerable, and now, this bitch is here ruining everything.
She's only here for a week.
Yeah, so. And, every time that she's talking and, just being horrible, and especially dragging Harry into it, he would just focus on, like, I gotta get the permission slip, it'll be worth it in the end. And occasionally thinking, like, oh yeah, polish. Oh, like,
he's trying to remember stuff from the manual, to distract himself.
Yeah, but, he would just keep thinking about this stuff, but eventually it's just too much. He can't deal with it. And so he's just like,
he snaps and yells
they didn't die in a car crash, fuck you. And he does unintentional magic, and, Marge just inflates. Yeah, and so they didn't mention it in this chapter. This is always referred to as Harry blowing up his aunt, which to me sounds like she fucking exploded.
Yeah.
But so she just inflates and, like, floats up to the ceiling, and there's this great scene of Vernon, like, trying to grab her and pull her down, and then the dog just randomly bites his leg. And so there's just this chain of, like, him grabbing her arm or whatever, and the dog's like...
in the movie, it looks more like, because she actually goes out of the window and starts to fly away into the sky, and it has to be, like, dealt with. I assume in the book, it's just she eventually deflated. In the movie, she fucking flew around somewhere. And
I think it's mentioned that they had to, like, take her to a doctor or something.
Oh, okay. But yeah, so she starts, in the movie she starts to fly away. Vernon grabs onto her leg and starts flying away. And so I always interpreted the dog biting Vernon's leg as, like, trying to pull them down to the ground. Here
it's just being a dick.
Yeah. And so the end of the chapter comes, just very fast and abrupt. He's just like, man, fuck you guys, fuck all of this, I'm done, I'm leaving. He packs his stuff, he
rushes over to the cupboard, it bursts open magically, he grabs his stuff, he goes upstairs, grabs his stuff. They try to stop him, and he's like, nope, bye.
Yeah. And I don't remember if this is addressed, but obviously since he did use magic outside of school, I would think this would come up with one of those letters again. I think it might be addressed.
It's addressed later. They brush it off, but yeah. There's reasons for that.
Okay. So that's basically it. Like, I was kind of surprised by it, because the movie draws this scene out a little bit, and then the scene of him leaving is, like, he actually confronts Vernon on the way out. Well, does he do that in the book as well? I can't remember.
I don't think he did. It just says, he's yelling, "Come back in here and put her right." He points his wand at Vernon, says she deserved it. You get away from me. I'm going. Yeah. It is all resolved in like 2 sentences. He's just like, fuck out of here.
Next moment, he was out in the dark, quiet street, heaving his heavy trunk behind him, Hedwig's cage under his arm. That's the end of the chapter.
Yep.
It's done. And so next time we'll pick up with where Harry goes after all this unfolds.
Disney World.
We have no comments to go over because we went over the ones from the last Chamber of Secrets chapter in the movie Let's Watch thing. And we only got one on that video, which was just looking forward to Prisoner of Azkaban. So yeah, I hope you guys are looking forward to more of this, and hope you enjoy chapters and stuff.
Yeah.